biography relies on working among three major Orthodox Jewish communities: the ultra-Orthodox Hasidic community of Gur, the modern Orthodox community, which is sometimes called Zionist Orthodoxy, or in the States, modern contemporary Orthodoxy, and the Sephardi ultra-Orthodoxy in Israel, and the community of people who are enhancing their religiosity, becoming closer and closer to religiosity. So it's like the three major Orthodox communities in Israel, and I must say that I have devoted my time, my thinking, my living with, to stay very much away from the body. Because the way that the non-Orthodox people were relating to women among Orthodox communities has been using a lot, like we tend to do when we are watching the other, to sort of reduce it to their body, reduce it to their looks, reduce it to something, to sexuality. But first and foremost, they were sort of stopped by or blocked by their covering of their body, by the wigs. And so I said, I'm not going to do anything concerning their body. I'm going to be very binaric, and I'm going to relate to their mind. And what I did is I tried to look into the question of what are ultra-Orthodox women are allowed to know. In other words, I was interested in their intellectual life, how they study, what are they studying, what kind of texts are open to them, how these texts are presented to them, what kind of texts are not presented to them. And in many ways, so I was interested in the what, in the how, and then also in the why. Why should they study at all if, to begin with, women are not obliged to study the Torah? And they do. So this was my area of research. So it really, and whenever everyone asked me, so how are they dressed? Are they, there is this it's like when you look for a flower or a bird, and you say it has this wings and this colors, and you look at the lexicon, and oh, this is the bird. So what kind of Hasidic women they are? They wear wigs, they wear kerchiefs, and I'm saying, I don't know, I don't know. Go figure. I was sort of really blocking it. Of course, I was interested in it. I described it a lot in my ethnography, in the monographs, in the books. But as an intellectual focus, I tried to really stay away from it. But as I was leaving sort of my last project with the ultra-Orthodox and Orthodox and gender communities, something happened. And it was weird, it was odd. I couldn't stay away from it. It was too much to stay away from it. And this is the last project, which we see here some images of it. And when I was asked to, hey, what I get to reviews, journals send me review stuff about ultra-Orthodoxy, and I'm saying, well, I'm a reborn Jew. I'm doing now material culture. I'm not doing Orthodoxy anymore. Please, there are enough people that are doing it. Go talk to them. No. So I thought about a way to combine some thoughts about this phenomena and some thoughts about my new research, which had to do with the development of Israeli style, local style, in a country that actually started a lot new. We have research about contemporary literature, contemporary art, and nothing seriously was made in the Boasian way about developing local forms, developing local styles, a language, a stylistic, materialistic language that one can look at and say, yes, this is something I know, this is something that... And this was not done because it was not done in anthropology for a long time. Again, people stayed away from it. It became folklore. It became something you don't want to do. And as I understand, your last meeting was here with the guru of the ontological turn. And one of the nice things about intellectual life, I think, that when I started my research, I didn't know that I'm part of the ontological turn. l'air du temps, like that, what happens in the air influences you, and I found myself becoming part of the ontological turn. I don't know if I passed the test or I failed the test, but of course I was very much influenced, I would say mainly by Boaz and Ingold, that I'm going to talk about him a little bit today, but of course about the new group of intellectuals that created, I think, an intellectual challenge to me that I will need to address in a few minutes, and a very interesting intellectual challenge. And so when I started the new project, I was searching for an object almost as a cliche, that there is no doubt that it's an Israeli object. An Israeli object that I can take and make away with it, search for its biography, its technology, its history, its producers, the change of time, its consumers, the way it's being used. And I took a cliche that it's like when anyone knows Israel materiality, the sandal that you see on the left side of the screen, which is called in Israel a biblical sandal, and which is called in Central Europe Jesus sandal. And no wonder. Tells you already about the authenticity of the object and its name. So my last project was about the sandal, and I followed this object for 3 years of research, history, archives, producers, etc. And so I will try to talk now about sort of a canopy, a theoretical canopy, that will talk about the need to treat the edges of our body. Why do we pay attention to the places where our body ends? And of course, it ends everywhere, because when we walk in space, we have the front and the back and the down and the up. The product or the production or the process of evolution, which is, I don't know how much it was part of Holbard's talk. It's very much part of Ingold talk, talking about the humankind within, immersed in the ecology, the erection, the evolution, the standing up, and the prices of standing up. And within Western culture, I'm sure you teach it in Introduction to Anthropology, the burden of the binary opposition of the down and the up. And I have a PhD student now who is working on the belt. The way where we separate, in Hasidic culture, for example, they have a gertel, and the gertel separates the lower bodies with our holes and our refuge, and the upper body with the heart and the soul and the mind, of course. So this Western separation and the meaning of what's being pulled down and what's being lifted up is very strong, and it seems like we take extra care to the separation of our body from the surface we stand on. And we treat also the top of our body. Sometimes we make it higher, all those hats and to enlarge our height, heels, of course, shoes, we'll see them later, the North African shoes and the Eastern shoes that have this long nose that comes up, our nails, that we make them longer and we make them colorful, our hair, of course. So this all, sort of specific organs that are seen as the end of the body get cultural, aesthetic treatment that needs maybe to be for a second look. And it's so obvious, it's so trivial, and yet it's still an area of production. People work there, people invest a lot of thinking, and people reproduce and also have a lot of guerrilla work around these areas. So when we see these two pictures at one shot, I mean, of course it's a collage that I made. If we start with the sandal, which the picture was taken in 1970 in a little trip that we made, 3 kids, a boyfriend, a girl. I mean, we were a guy and 2 girls. That's not my. It took me a while to see that it's not my leg. Could have been. It's my friend's foot. Shows you very strongly the fact that she is wearing a sandal, but the strap is open, and it shows that her leg is put on a rock and little stones, and it's out there. It's on the road. It's taking a track, and we were taking the train to the north of Israel and just choosing one of the wadis, one of the canyons, and as we say in Hebrew, we were doing it. It was this thing that you grew up on Zionism, and that you have to learn to know your country from your legs. You have to conquer the land. This is very sort of German attitude of romanticism, of the rucksack and the going and the being, which was adopted by the Zionists into coming to a land that was foreign to them and doing the land, learning to conquer it by being in it, immersed in it. So that's what we were doing freely. I mean, we were members in a youth movement, but we just decided we need to do more. So and to do it, not with good shoes that are suitable for walking tracks, but of course we can do it with our sandals. We are sandal wearers. And not only that we are sandal wearers, we sometimes don't even really lace them up, which I'll come back to in the Boasian sense of forms and of local forms. So it's exposed, it is seen, it has not the minimum, I would say, which you'll see pretty soon, what was taken archaeologically, historically, as the minimum separation of the foot from the surface. It's not the minimum, but it's quite minimum. It's just 2 straps, not too much. On the other hand, we see a group of women covered with tons of cloth. And this group of women came out to the open at the mid-2000 with a story. It was called Mama Taliban. Of course, the journalist called her Mama Taliban. Boya Keren. I don't want to go too much into the details of this group. It's a small group of ultra-Orthodox women. Mainly, most of them were not born ultra-Orthodox. They became ultra-Orthodox, or they were born sort of Orthodox and enhanced their religiosity. And they have decided on their own, with several leaders, to take seriously, literally, the endless demands that I've been describing in all my writings, from women to be modest. As wherever women are going, they get those lectures of modesty, modesty, modesty. It's like bombarding them with modesty, modesty. And if I jump to the end from my analysis, they sort of said one day, the halakha says women should not be heard. The voice of the woman should not be heard. And the woman is like a queen. She should be inside a palace, is it not outside? So in a sense, they were just saying, you guys, you're not going to see me, and you're not going to hear me. I'm not there. Look for me. Women would not take vows of silence and not speak to their kids, their husbands. They will not unveil themselves inside the house. I mean, even if you're Orthodox and you cover your hair, you can take sometimes your cover inside the house. They don't. They cover themselves inside the house. They cover their hands. I don't know if we see here, maybe in another. They cover all their hands, and not even with the gloves, and not mittens, so you can see the shape. It's just like a pile of shmatis that they're wearing. It's just like full of cloth, and you lose even. This is the extreme. This is something in between that they are called the women of the shawl. They have those shawls. Also the girls, from the age of, like Muslims, from the age of, they don't even wait for 12. It could be 8, it could be 9, it could be sometimes 6 or 7. This whole thing was initiated by women and spread by other women and was opposed by men, by their husbands, by their rabbis, by other sects that were warning the women, do not join them, do not listen to them. They are actually promoting a sort of way away from Judaism. Do not join them, do not even think of seeing them as anything right. You can see here a woman that's in the streets of Jerusalem, maybe Mea Shearim. She's like a typical Hasidic woman from Mea Shearim, because you can see her. I'm doing it now what I didn't want to do. She's wearing the black kerchief, which is, the black kerchief is like, is the extremist, it's satmer. It's, they shave their hair and they put this thing. And she is staring at them as if they are like from the moon. The way ultra-Orthodox women look can vary, of course. These are, again, there are, of course, after they started, there were several men that tried to sort of appropriate the group, saw the potential, and gave them the sort of his appreciation and writings. And there is another group like that in Canada, Lev Tahor, run by a guy. So there are connections between them, but some really try to sustain their independence. So these women are walking in Jerusalem, so that's another picture of them. And here you can also see, that's a typical ultra-Orthodox, very ultra-Orthodox woman in Jerusalem wearing a kerchief, again maybe in Mea Shearim, and she's looking at this woman, and you see her hands on the baby stroller, which is not, it's not even gloves. And it's very warm in Israel, let me tell you. It's very dark, and a lot of things. And some of them have kids taking them because they can't see. So they're led by their kids. Okay, and the ultra-Orthodox women I worked with, most of them are wearing wigs, and you can see them here in a scenario that's like the new scenario, that they're working in all kinds of technological industries as computer, and on the very lower level, they get education, and they come to workspaces that are specially organized for them. It's only women. They have each one of them has their own booth. They have buses coming in, and they're very reliable. And a lot of the technological industries like to give them work. So you would see more and more. This is the more common ultra-Orthodox woman, and I just finished with another picture of a friend of mine, Cheli Ibengoim, and her daughter, and she's one generation further. She's a political activist, a social activist to promote. They run a group that says not being voted, not voting, because the ultra-Orthodox parties do not put women as their representatives. So they said, if we are not being voted, then we are not going to vote. So this is a really rebel. But the former rebellion comes, or the agency comes from a very different source. In my analysis, I did see it as a sort of a resentment. Of course, it's not being explained in this way. But the thing is that if we'll take here the words of John Scott, John Scott published in 2007 her book, The Politics of the Veil. After reading into the whole discussion of the veil, mainly in France, now John Scott is a historian of France. She was way more interested in the République, exactly like now a discussion about terror and refugee and all that is aimed, theoretically, at what is the République going to do? How can you maintain the spirit of France when you deal with a complicated problem? Like yesterday, all I could hear in my English TV channels at the hotel was Donald Trump thing. And the discussion, the serious American discussion, how can you retain the spirit of America when you deal with serious problems? And that's exactly what Scott was doing with the veil as a challenge. And she was saying, I just bring here 3 quotes. It's a brilliant book. It's a very thin book. With most, I agree, some I disagree, but it's really, really, she's an astonishing historian. There was something sexually amiss about girls in headscarves. It was as if both too little and too much were being revealed. So this whole thing of playing with your appearance in the public sphere was seen by the Western eye, according to John Scott, as something that was challenging to the eye, to the gaze of the, let's say, Western man. I'm showing you too little, I'm just showing this, because it's not like the other women. I'm just showing my face, but it's a lot, because I take away everything else, and then there is my eyes and my face, and I'm here, and I'm watching you, and you cannot watch maybe whatever you want to watch. So I'm showing what I want, and I'm revealing what I want, and I'm playing with my appearance, not according to the rules. And in this way, I bring it to the surface that there are rules, nothing is taken for granted. And it was sexually, she says, it was something sexually amiss, the too much and the too little. Wearing the headscarf itself became an act of aggression. And that's very interesting. And I think, although the case of the women from Bet Shemesh, as they are called, is very similar in this respect, although they're not even showing their face, it became an act of aggression. And how do you know it was an act of aggression? In the way that the regime reacted to that. It reacted by banning them, by fighting against them, by accepting questions for divorce from their husbands, by chasing them, because it was you cannot control. You can control, to a certain extent, your appearance in the public sphere, but not that far, not that much. You cannot hide yourself. You cannot take all kinds of decisions about your religiosity, about the way you work God, about your interpretation of the right ways to be a sexual woman and a mother and a wife. And the language of the body in this respect, she says, is that of the accessibility to the other sex. So here, John Scott, as a feminist, says, in a way, the language of the body in this respect, or in general respects, you would say, is how much the accessibility, how much do I transmit the possibilities of being there and not being there. And in many ways, Scott took this further to say that it was, they saw it as an attack on the République, and in this way, the question to make the veil or other religious symbols possible in the public sphere was too much for laïcité, and was banned, but the scarf had a special gender side to it that Scott shows very nicely. As I say, the interesting thing was that vis-a-vis the Muslim veil, where you can see women in their homes that they're wearing whatever and wearing makeup and stuff, these women turn their homes into tents, like the 4 mothers in the Bible. So they start hanging all kinds of cloth instead of doors. And she's sitting like here. You can see that she has a cord because it's part of the film. and that's the way she is at home. At home. So the kids don't see her. Her husband doesn't see her. And that's just something of what I just said. The Jewish veiled women are covered inside their own homes and not when they go out. As I said, women should not be heard and not be seen. Okay, no one can see me, no one can hear me. So if I just sum up and go back to the question of where the body ends, choosing the head, of course, everything was covered, the hands and of course the legs, but what you see when you look at the picture, what you actually see or what you see first is this thing on the face, because the face has its identity, has this thing that many times, not in the niqab, but in the hijab, you see the face, and you see the face very strongly. And the decision to take this part and treat it, and to do something with the hair, and what to do with the hair. And when I was doing my research, there was another issue that a student of mine wrote about it. It was that they realized that the wigs were made of hair that Indian women cut their long and beautiful hair and give it to the shrines as part of work and tribute to the gods, and then it's taken from there and they make wigs out of there, and then they said, okay, we cannot use those wigs because it's part of it's paganism, so those wigs are not kosher. So there was a carnival of burning wigs, and it was like crazy. Some women said, I hid my wig till it's over, and then I took it out again. So this whole thing of treating that part, the hat, and of course, as I said, I don't want to go too much into it. It's like when you go into a Hasidic meeting of women, you'll see wigs, and then you'll see a wig and a hat on it. And then if you see a wig and a huge hat on it, that's an important woman. So it's like kings and all that, the crowns, the kings, the Pope. I just saw the Pope last night opening the doors of the mercy. I mean, it's there. It's just like, what do you do there in order to say, my altitude there is a sort of never ending. I sort of extract it, or I hide it. And this management of the edges to sort of organize or run the relationship of our body in the environment, it divides the environments. As I said, the public sphere, the house. So they have also challenged the house inside. So where are you actually? Where are you? Where do you meet your body, if at all? So I'll leave this open for now, and then we'll switch to the other side of exposure, of the barefoot. And in Hebrew, na'ul, which means that you wear something, lin'ol, na'alaim, is to lock. You are locked. When you wear shoes, you are locked. And chalutz is a tricky word. Chalutz is a pioneer, and you say lachlotz na'alaim, to take off your shoes. You are opening it. You are throwing it away. But it's also the word of it's also to lechaletz is to rescue, and chalutz is a pioneer. So these words play together in a very interesting way of what the first generation of Zionists did with their relation to the environment, and how they treated the body. That there is enough written, or not enough, but there is good literature written about the Zionist body, the creation of a new body, of a new male body, vis-a-vis the diasporic body, which was very feminine. So enough, Boyarin wrote amazing body of work on the Zionist body. And so within this literature, I was looking at the objects that played a role in the constitution of this bare body that looks for maximum exposure to the environment, and in order to learn through the body and to present presence in a sort of a natural presence in the environment. So we'll go to the sandal. This is just a poster in Mea Shearim against those ladies. Okay, so we go back to this barefoot on the rock. This is a typical biblical sandal, not from the best quality, but we'll talk about it in a sense. So when I was looking at shoes, you know, these shoes, the Chopin or the Pionele, 17th century Venice, a lot of the shoes were elevated from the ground for different reasons. You know, it was the roads were dirty, and when we look at the sanctuary laws in Middle Ages towns, we can see the exact instructions of how high the heel can be, because they said that the servants could not wear high heels. They had the ladies had to lean on them when they were walking because they were so hard to walk on. And also they say that if you take really, we'll see another one which is like way higher. No, these are peducas, but like that, you use more cloth for your dresses, and that's a waste, or only some people can afford it, not everyone can afford it. So these are Eastern one, and you see with the mother of pearl, which is Damaski or Turkey, typical work, and these ones. Again, it's a different idea, but it goes back to the same thing. These are the peducas, the toe ring sandal that come from India, and as I have learned, a lot of the sandals come from India. That are the Brahmins are using them not to step on animals or to reduce the amount of possibility of hurting animals on the ground. So they should be away from the ground for a different reason. But again, stay away, not to save the life of the animals. But there is constant dialogue with how much we take ourselves away from the ground. And here I go to Team Ingold, which I think was marked as a non-totally ontological, but I think, and he's going crazy because of this. He's just going nuts because he's been there all the time, and then they came, the young kids, and say you're good, you're not good, and he's been working on the existence of us, not in this binary distinction, but within the environment. And now he sees them coming and taking the glory. But okay. So Team Ingold talks about, there is an interesting art paper he wrote that's called Culture on the Ground. The world perceived through the feet. And he says boots and shoes support our establishment notions of the body and the evolution, just as writing supports our notions of science and history. And so he talks about the way that we have locked, actually, exactly like the word in Hebrew, naul, how we locked our feet and we have devoided them from their intelligence. We hardly can use the feet anymore. The nerves, there are so many nerves in our feet that are numb. We cannot use our fingers. We learn many times. We do all kinds of special exercises now to bring it back. But we have locked them. We put them in boots. And he says we have turned the down area of us into walking machines. It's just a machine that walks. And then we have invested and developed the upper body and the hands. And he puts the chair inside. And he says then when we have the chair, then fantastic. Then that's what we need. Then even the feet don't need to move, and then we are all clear for this good part, the part that goes towards heaven. You can see, I just mentioned, this is a typical North African shoe that does that. The toes in ballet that are, I like here the look of her feet, which is like mercy, mercy. The feet of a ballerina is just like a mess. The nails are always blue, they're always cut. Also runners, marathon runners. So this whole thing of losing your weight, flying in the air, being able to just go up there, as opposed to the modern dance that takes you down, takes you to the floor. So these tensions are interesting in shoes. And here it says this thing again, where the boot is reducing. It's the chair, never mind, it's in this same article. We'll skip it, where he goes back to this division. Now, when I started looking for this exposure of the feet, this object sandal that's called biblical sandal, I wanted to know if during the biblical time people were wearing sandals. If we call it a biblical sandal, is it a biblical sandal? Did Abraham, our father, wear a biblical sandal? Now, the work of Holbard and Hanered then, I think, came out. And the introduction was such a mind blower. It was just like so interesting, not to be ontological and to try to stay as close as possible to the object without going immediately to the symbolism, and to be able to offer an alternative, different worlds and not worldviews. To be able to say, hey, this is not a watch is a watch is a watch, and there are very different ways to analyze and interpret this watch. If someone thinks that this watch is a transmitter to God, then it is a transmitter to God. It's not for me as an anthropologist to come and say he thinks that this is what it is. If I treat it this way, maybe I can go and find something new and not reproduce what I know. And I tried. I tried to do that analytically and methodologically. And when you go through the chapters of that book, Thinking Through Things, you see that most chapters, maybe all of them, except maybe one, fail. Fail to do that. And you think maybe it's impossible. Maybe you can't do it. It's just like when we were in postmodernism, the other chapter, and we were trying to think outside of our narratives. And these exercises are really important. They make us think. I think they have the potential of being creative. Maybe we can take some of it. And if I think backward on the project, it came out as a paper in American Anthropologist and as a book in Hebrew on Sandals. I failed most of it, but I think I've gained a little. So let's see what you can do when you try to stay as close as possible to the object and see whether the object can tell you. Because when I said I'm gonna work on Sandals, oh, okay, kibbutzim, socialism, trying to be like the Arabs, everything. You know, we talk about that. Oh, we took it from the Arabs. Of course, we take everything from the Arabs, which we do a lot. So it's the land, it's the hummus, it's the look, it's the sandals. It's just another thing we took. Well, okay, now you have to see what really happened. Because if this is where I end up, why take the sandal? It's just a waste of time, because I know where I end up. So I try to be ontological. Looking at that time, which is like 15, let's say 1,500, 1,700, 2,000 years before Christ, what were people wearing sandals? What were they wearing? So first of all, I go to my friends, archaeologists, historians. Yes, they were wearing sandals. They were wearing sandals. Even the word sandal is Greek. and so in the Bible it says na'al, the same na'ul, the same locked. But when the Bible says na'al, we know that it meant sandal. There were no shoes, it was sandals. So what kind of sandal? I don't know if we can see that much clear. This is from the British Museum. These are the walls from Namrud, from Assyria, Ashur-natsipal, the king. And they were wearing, maybe we'll see it on a closer look, they were wearing thongs. Okay, they were wearing thongs. Throughout the Middle East, people were wearing thongs. Different kind of, like we can see here that he has a heel. You see? Sort of what we call now a platform. It's sort of this rocky heel that he has. That's the same. Okay. Here we see it much clearer. That's a bronze statue of the god Baal from the north of Israel, from Chatzor HaGlilit. And he was an Assyrian god, very, very popular in Palestine, Israel, throughout. And he's wearing, what you see here is like this thing, and another one here on the big toe, which is very typical also to Indian sandals. And when we look at him from the side, he also has this heel. So I held him in my hand. If you want to visit him, he's in the Israel Museum, in the renovated Israel Museum. And so, yes, he's wearing sandals, these kind of sandals. This is from the Neue Museum in Berlin. Egyptian sandals. This is gold. It's not that the Tutankhamun sandals are also thongs. So, just to shorten this thing, I hope I have convinced you. The Middle East area, people were wearing thongs. So if there was a biblical sandal, it was not these two straps. It was that thong, and even the sign Ankh, which is the sign of life in the hieroglyph letters. The Egyptian scholars are saying that when you have a sign letter, you can, if you want to say a bird, you draw a bird. But if you want to say abstract things like life, how can you draw life? They say that the Ankh, this is a very famous, also, you know, we have it on pendants and stuff. It's a sort of a picture of the sandal from above. This one that I have here is a bit odd because many times it's not divided to two. It's just this one thing, and it says, okay, this one goes around the ankle, this is the side, and this is the strap in the middle, and it means that as long as you're alive and you're walking, then this became the sign of life. And Gardiner, who put together the signs, the Egyptian signs, the hieroglyph sign, put the sign sandal and the sign and Ankh side by side because he thought that they're the same. Another interesting thing is that the word sandal in Egyptian is Tibet or Shebet. And I'm sure you have here Jabeta. You have the bread Jabeta, came from Italy. Have you heard it? Jabeta, Shabeta. Even if we talk about Shosir, we talk about the word sandler shoemaker, Zapatero, Zapatero. This all comes from Shabet, from the Egyptian word, and it's not a Latin word, but in all Latin languages, the word shoe comes from the Egyptian. Well, we had Cleopatra, and she was in the Ptolemy house, so words travel. Just to show you another use of the sandals as a symbolic thing, beyond just being a sandal, because I had to say, oh, you're searching sandals, you know, why? Well, sandals are important. So they're life, they're the Ankh. This is Byzantine mosaic from Turkey, from a sort of a bathhouse, and it says Ben Elave, and down it was Salvus Lutum, for the people when they come, either just to show in and out, maybe, or maybe take off your shoes, put on your shoes, never mind. But it was something that was used as an indication, as a logo. You know, it's just something that people understood more beyond what it meant. And I found it in many mosaics, I even found it one in our cafe near my house, that they put signs of sandals because they wanted to show that there is a new second floor to the people. So they just put the sandals, or the Habayanas one that people wear in the summer, that they're so popular. Okay, so now I come to the history. Wow. 10 minutes, wow. Okay, so I'm going to be very quick. If there is one figure at the history of Israeli contemporary art, and I see him as the father of the story of forms and styles in Israel, please meet Nimrod. We just talked about Namrud, and it all connects. Nimrod, a statue by Danziger, was prepared for the opening of the Hebrew University, the archaeological section of on the Mount Scopus. Mount Scopus was started in 1925. The university, it was in the late 40s. Eventually, it was an ordered work. It was rejected for all kinds of reasons, and one of the reasons was that it didn't look Jewish enough. It was the archaeology for the Jewish thing, and you can see that he doesn't even have he wasn't circumcised. So the guy who made it was inspired by his studies in England, and he said that he watched a lot the Assyrian wars, and when he was looking for a language, an aesthetics of this area, he wanted to connect to Assyria, and this was rejected. But the fate of this statue was amazing. We don't have. It's mainly the object that was as much was written about him. The object that has the most literature written about him in contemporary Israeli art. And now, and I said, the renovated museum, he stands on a podest at the center of the campus as you walk in, and it's an amazing museum, one of the 10 best in the world awarded, and it's just like a policeman showing you the history of the forms. This is an ethnographic section. Here he's watching out, and there are olive trees out in the garden, and on his right hand there is the contemporary Israeli collection, and on his left hand the Judaism and archaeology. So he stands there, and all the guides wait with the groups and say, let's wait until Nimrod is clear. And then when they clear Nimrod, she brings in the students and say, okay, we start from here. It's like a pivot sum. Now, this is a family originated from Galicia, then ran away from Poland in the First World War, ended up in Holland, and finally came to Israel. And these are the four brothers and 2 sisters that started, again, I don't have the time to talk about it, they started, they were shoemakers. I mean, Jews, there are a tremendous amount. Barbara Kirschenblatt talked about it with her father. There were like 300,000 at least shoemakers in this area, Jewish shoemakers, because it was sort of an open guild. Jews were, that was a very common way to make a living. So they were shoemakers in Poland and then in Holland, and then they came to Israel, and they realized, this guy realized that in Israel you should make sandals. And little by little they started to make only sandals. And he's the one who managed to label Israel, and that's from 69, from the land of the sandal. He turned Israel to be the land of the sandal, not the land of the Bible, the land of the sandal. But he made a biblical sandal, so he's holding them both. And here, you know, it's an old story of Bar Kochba tearing the mouth of the lion. And he created a situation where when tourists came to Israel, they would not go back without Nimrod sandals. That was something you had to bring back from Israel. And between 2 to 4, stores were closed because it was resting time, and they had a special permission to open between 2 to 4 only for tourists, because there was one store. The guy was a genius. We can talk about him forever. Now maybe we'll end up here because I don't have time. In 1960 somewhere, no archive, people have no respect for objects. So in Israel, every letter, every word, everything written, every text is so nicely archived by objects, I think in many places, and there's no respect for objects. So this company, which is still now in the hands of the grandchildren, very little things to find. So I don't know when, but it is somewhere in the 60s. And it says here, in a very accurate way, it tells the story of the excavations near Metzada and in the Judea desert. These excavations had a tremendous effect on the history of generally, but in Israel, but for me, on the history of material culture in Israel, because things were found, personal things, makeup of women, the sandal of this lady Bavta, clothing, wool, linen, and a lot of designers were inspired by that. People were thirsty to do Zionism, and if they were shoemakers, they will do their Zionism through shoes. And if they were fashion designers, they did it through creating fashion. So the excavations there, led by the son of the guy who rejected Nimrod. His father rejected the statue of Nimrod. He was Sukenik the father, and Sukenik the son was conducting these excavations. They found the sandal of Bavta. And they give an accurate description of it. But the one I want to read with you is, in any case, one must admit the resemblance between this ancient sandal and those worn by the style-conscious young Israeli Sabra today. And that is remarkable. And Nimrod Model 53, its 20th century counterpart, and a very popular style in what? In ample within to this fact. Witness to this fact. Yes, I can see it from here. Okay. So what did he do? He did a replica of this sandal. Created a replica of this sandal. The sandal is in the Israel Museum. He did a replica. And look, he says, isn't it amazing? You see this sandal? And it's so popular among Israeli, as if the whole thing that Israeli girls just continue to wear it. It's just so popular. The fact that it was, look, it was worn once and they still wear it. Like he took it, he did a replica, he put it, and then in the text, and I'm saying again, the text is very accurate. He gives all the correct information about it. Just at the end, he's doing his like promotion, and he says, in any case, one must admit the resemblance between the ancient sandal and the current one. You have to admit it. Of course, you have to admit it. He did it. And he continued to do stuff like this. So this goes along with the thong. Again, people were wearing thong. It's not the biblical sandal, so I'll just end up. This is another source of inspiration. The wife of one of his brothers was a Jew from Iraq, and a lot of Jews from Iraq, some Jews from Iraq lived in India, and they lived in India, and her family sent her sandals. So you can see here Indian dancers, and I was sure when I was a kid that these are the Israeli folk dancers, but then I learned that these are Indian dancers. This is where I will end. This is 1942, something like that, in a kibbutz, shoemaker group, people that came from Czechoslovakia, from Prague, waiting to get land to build their own kibbutz. And as they were waiting in the city of Nahariya, they divided themselves to groups to go and make money, to clean houses, to sell this, to sell that. It's komuna. And a group of them were kids of shoemakers. They never thought that when they would come to Israel, they would be shoemakers. They didn't want to be shoemakers. They wanted to be farmers. But it was a way to make money. And so they started by mending shoes, etc. And then they said, hey, we can make shoes. And they started to make shoes. And these are the two types that they made. First time that we see the vertical straps, not the thong. Okay? Now the vertical straps is what they saw in Central Europe. And I think the major difference is that with a thong, it's harder to wear socks. Of course you can, we know it from the Japanese, but it's harder. And with these vertical ones, you can wear socks. And that's more from Europe. Now, it's a whole new thing in Israel if you wear sandal with socks. I mean, don't do that. My father used to do that, and I was like, Daddy, you can't do it. Don't do it. You're either Polish or we say German. So this became, in the kibbutzim, they started to produce this to sell. And then they started, you see the patent is mandatorial. It's when the Brits were here, because I found it in the mandatorial archive. And they started to produce this, and quite quickly, that's the major, that's like a centerfold, I call it, from Ingold. That's their classics. And you can see that Ingold in Tel Aviv produced those two, the same ones. A little bit different than, but these two. And these are that's the thing. Why? Because kids were going to the kibbutzim to volunteer in the 40s, before the State of Israel was established, and of course after, because Nimrod's prime time is the 60s till 73, 74. That's the classic era that I'm working on now, between 65 to 75. And people were going to the kibbutzim, and they wanted to look like kibbutzniks, even if they are in Tel Aviv. So and everything has to be labeled in Tel Aviv. I mean, stylistically, if you want, at the end it has to be labeled in Tel Aviv, because that's the capital where the style gets its acknowledgement. So he was producing these sandals, high quality, handmade. You had them forever. Your parents would take you there once a year because you grew up. You had to wait in line. My mom would take me off school, like I would not go to school for the first 2 hours because she didn't want to wait in the line. And would not wait to the vacation, and then we'll buy it, and then I'll go back to school, lying about why we did it. I didn't feel well or something like that. And if your leg did not grow, you had them forever. So this is the biblical sandal. This was called chugistic. We don't have time to go into this. And this was the third one that was maybe more for kids and for, you see that it's a smaller number, but also later this one was for girl soldiers. What we see generally is that it's either a thong or a vertical stripe. This is the classic, some of them went away. The general thing in the style was as little as possible, like this is too much, this is too much, and it will go away. And every year they produce the same sandals, adding just a little bit and reducing quite a lot. And the style developed as having as little as possible on your shoe, and wearing, for example, the boys always, especially the boys, would untie this, so it will be very not tight, so you can play with your leg inside like it's a little shy. I don't know how it's like you're a little bit, you're not tight. You're not na'ul. You're na'ul v'chalutz. It's just like as little as possible. Just to close with Boaz, Boaz always asks, how do you know a style is a style? It has to stay, even when technology changes, even when the generation change. The style finds its way to come back and come back. And today, the most typical shoe, sandal, of course the sandal lost its priority. The boys don't want to wear it, the men don't want to wear it. But if they wear sandals, and in Israel we wear sandals, and that's especially like kids for trips and after the army, and it's shoesh, this one. It looks like teva, but it's not teva. And that's the most popular sandal for girls and boys, and then later for men. And it's a totally new technology for grip, for trips. It can get wet, it can dry. It has different colors, you can choose your color, but it retains the two stripes, vertical stripes, and a lot of exposure of the feet. The important thing is the exposure of the feet. That source is just another story from the evacuation. It's very popular among the modern Orthodox and the settlers. So this is a bitter picture from the evacuation of the Gaza Strip, where both the soldier, both the policemen have the drinking kit that the same producer does, and the kids are wearing the sandals. It's very popular, and the soldiers and the policemen are happy. So the capitalist makes money from wherever they can. And that one, which is, you know it as Birkenstock, I guess, but it's done by the same kibbutz that did in the 1940s the biblical sandal. It took the idea of the vertical stripes from Central Europe then, and again in the 80s when they were almost collapsing, they introduced the imitation of Birkenstock and turned it to the second most popular sandal among Israeli men when they want to be dressy a little bit. So they wear this kind, and every male from middle class, I would say, and they're not that expensive, would have both, would have them, but it always has to do only with the two. It can either be this one, which is back to the thong, and this is the hybrid that was rejected because it's a biblical sandal on Birkenstock sole, and that was, it's just like, this is like wrong. Okay. Someone, a fashion reporter in an Israeli newspaper sent it to me a few weeks ago. Malia Obama. He said, "Do you see what I see?" And I mean, when I look at it, I know it's. I mean, there's nothing special about it. I know it's made in Israel. Someone brought it to her, and it's well, I should say maybe made in Israel or made in Palestine, because now if you want to buy the original leather, not the grip, the rubber and the textile, not the Birkenstock, you want to buy the Nimrod original leather one, you have to go to the old city of Jerusalem, and all this collection, the double spread that I said, all this collection is being made in Hebron, leather made. The technology is a little different, but they still make it, and it's sold in the old city in Jerusalem because the tourists still want to buy this one. So if you want us to go, to more the theoretical questions, maybe we'll have time in the dialogue between, in the conversation. So I'll stop right here.
Thank you.